Welcome to Davis Park Church of Christ this Memorial Day weekend. Want to ask you a question to start off with. Raise your hand. I'm going to ask you to raise your hand. Raise your hand if the person sitting next to you is socially awkward. I need some more hands. Need some more hands. I'm seeing a lot of wives' hands being raised next to their husbands. I'm sitting next to Corey in spirit. That's why she raised her hand. But what do you talk about with someone when you have nothing else to talk about? The weather, right? If you're socially awkward like me, then you talk about it a lot. You also talk about it, especially if you're new to the area. When I was new to the area, people would come up to me and say, "What do you like about the area?" And I'd be like, number one in my mind, the weather. I've never lived in a place like this before. Never lived in California. Never really lived west of the Mississippi. I've never lived in a Mediterranean climate. Jesus had lived in a Mediterranean climate. It's awesome. I'm used to snow in Detroit. Worst winter they ever had in 100 years in Detroit. I'm used to hurricanes on the East Coast, humidity in the Southeast. But here it's like there's really not any weather. It's just varying levels of heat. It's awesome. But what we find in the book of Acts, what we find Paul doing is that he talks about the weather a whole lot. And it wasn't because he was socially awkward. No, it was because there's a tradition of thought that when Jesus appeared to Paul on the road to Damascus, when Saul was on his way to imprison Christians, to have them persecuted, that when Jesus stopped him in his tracks there on the road to Damascus, that Jesus utilized a bolt of lightning, a lightning strike. There's a tradition of thought that that's what happened when the light shone upon him on the Damascus road. There's a tradition of thought that Jesus used a bolt of lightning. For one reason, even to this day, that area that Paul was walking along the eastern slope of Mount Hermon from northern Galilee to Damascus, even to this day, that area is known for very frequent lightning strikes. You know, lightning strikes about 100 times per second in this world. It strikes 3 billion times per year, and you have about 1 in 3,000 chance of being struck by lightning in your lifetime. And if you're like Saul, your chances and odds are probably increased by that if you're doing what Saul was doing. But I want to show you a couple images of the road to Damascus image and story that's been portrayed in Christian art throughout history. This is an early Christian image of when Jesus appeared to Saul on the road to Damascus before he became Paul. So this is early Christian. The next one, this is by Caravaggio in 1601, the depiction of this story. Paul lying on his back, falling off his horse, the arms outstretched. And then just recently, in 2013, in the History Channel's series, The Bible, how they depicted the story of Saul on the road to Damascus. But Saul in Acts 22 and Acts 26, some of the most significant moments in his life are occurring. It's after his third missionary journey, and he's back at Jerusalem, and he's standing before this entire throng and crowd of Jews, angry at him, ready to kill him and stone him because they think that he brought Gentiles into the temple compound. You have Saul, standing before Roman officials, about to be sent before Caesar to Rome, and giving a defense before these Roman officials to give him a guilty or not guilty verdict. And what does he talk about first? In Acts 22 before the Jews and in Acts 26 before the Roman officials? What does he start off with? He starts off with talking about the weather. He starts off with talking about his story, the moment on the road to Damascus that the light shone upon him. He sets the scene for his story, and he draws in his Jewish listeners and his Gentile listeners. Why did he do that? Why did he start off like that? It's probably because he knew the power of story. You know, we have more power than we think we do to bring about changes to our circumstances by telling stories. We have more power than we think that we do to bring about changes in our stories, in our lives, by telling stories than perhaps making an argument. Stories transform. Stories engage. Stories inspire. Stories grip and bond generations together. And this brings us to our main point this morning, is that a person with a testimony, a person with a story, is never at the mercy of a person with an argument. Think about that. A person with a testimony, a person with a story, is never at the mercy of a person with an argument. Our seniors are equipped to tell their story, to share a testimony, and not just make an argument. We want to send them off with that ability, equipped to do that very thing. And we want to celebrate that this morning. So at this time, I'd like to invite 4 of our seniors up. Why don't you come on up, guys? They're going to sit down up here with me, and we're going to ask them a couple questions. And I want them to share just how their stories have been formed so far these first 18 years of their lives. All right, so first off, we have Bailey Newman. Bailey, you're going to graduate this week from your charter school, which was, because of Keys?
Yes.
All right, Keys Charter School. And you're going to be attending?
LCU.
LC. She's going to be attending LCU in the fall. All right. Okay, so Bailey, let me ask you this question. How has Davis Park empowered your faith story?
Davis Park has empowered my faith story by just being there, and through being there, just the people that I know here. I know the Beards, and they've been a big, huge part of my life since I was a baby. And I've known the Martins. They taught me, Peggy Martin taught me in kindergarten, and I can remember certain things. And it's through the challenges that I've faced in talking to these people and the way that they told me what they did. And it was more of a personal relationship that I had with them, that they were able to tell me what I needed to hear instead of what I wanted to hear. And so it just made things a lot easier to make decisions, that I had people behind me who believed in the same things that I believed, at least at the core of it. So it was really good.
Cool. Thank you, Bailey. Why don't you pass it on to Daniel? This is Daniel Oliani. He just graduated from Enix High School on Thursday, and he's going to be going on, he talked about this last week, going on with Youth with a Mission to Perth, Australia. Mm-hmm. So, Daniel, why don't you kind of answer that same question I just asked Bailey. How has Davis Park empowered your faith story?
Okay. Davis Park has just empowered my faith story just by, I would say first and foremost with my parents back there. And it wasn't one of those things that the church kind of had any direct involvement in it, but it was the fact that it was one of those God things that, before I was with them, I was with Walter and Dolores Leonard, and they attended church here, and, some things got kind of bad, and they approached that, Walter approached them and said, "Hey, would you like to take this kid?" And they're like, "Yeah, we would love to." But I think throughout our Christian walk, we are definitely told that God loves us unconditionally. And I think sometimes, sometimes you get told something so much that you almost start to not believe it. Mm-hmm. And there are things that happen in your life where as a Christian you think, how could God love me for doing this or love me for doing that? But I think through them being my parents, I've definitely learned that. And I really believe that God definitely loves me unconditionally because of them, and they've definitely taught me that firsthand. Right. So
thanks, Daniel. So next is Samantha Lund. She'll be graduating this week from Ripon High School, and you're planning to attend Pepperdine?
Yes.
All right, in the fall. So how has So how has Davis Park, for you, Samantha, empowered your faith story?
Davis Park has simply taught me that church is about God. It's not about any of us. It is here where I went through the most grief and where I have my fondest moments. And I think that's exactly what molded who I am today, that it happened here. This is where tribulation should happen. It is here where I met people who changed my life. Aaron and Sarah Scott, the Cowans, the Becks, the Foxes, the Newmans, and the Pattons. Through these relationships, I experienced relationships become broken and recreated again. And I can sit here today and call Davis Park my home.
Okay. Thank you, Sam. Last but not least, Scott Cowan. All right, he just graduated from Grigori High School this past Thursday.
Yep. And
still going to be attending college in the fall. Still waiting to make a decision on that one.
Undecided at this point, but.
Oh.
Yeah.
Okay.
Well, I definitely am attending college. I just don't know where yet. So we'll see. We'll see. I know it's late.
All right. So Scott, how has Davis Park empowered your faith story?
I think, well, it has in a lot of ways, but I think the one that sticks out to me is just all the relationships that I've made here, and specifically the adults who've taken time to get to know me and take an interest in me. Craig and Irene, Daryl and Ellen, Barb and Chris, Wayne and Jackie, obviously my own parents, Ron and Liz, they're not here today, but you guys, it doesn't take much to change a teenager's life. It doesn't take much to have a big impact on a teenager's life. At least it didn't take much for me. Just talking to me before services or after services, talk to me about school or what I'm interested in, really has made a big difference on the decisions that I make and my opinion on life and God and church. And so I think that's the biggest contribution that Davis Park's had to my story, and I just wanted to thank all of you personally.
All right. Okay, so now we're going to ask a different question, then we're going to go down from Scott to Bailey. And the second question goes like this, Scott, and we'll start off with you. Second question is, what would you encourage Davis Park to do to empower your generation's stories?
I think biggest thing I've learned from going to church, growing up in the church, is that it can't be about you. It's got to be about, first and foremost, your relationship with God. And secondly, it's got to be about your relationship with the person next to you, the people all around you. That's why we call it family, because we're children of God. We're all created in His image. And I feel like just the most helpful thing you can do when you attend a church is to just not be about you. I strongly believe that many issues can be solved by selflessness, and also focusing on the things that are going to change someone's life rather than change someone's opinion. Focusing on those things that are going to make a difference in their determination of salvation, and putting aside differences and realizing that we are all God's children, and we're all here for the same God. And I think that's what I would say.
All right, appreciate you, Scott.
Yep.
All right, Sam. So, how would you encourage Davis Park to empower your generation's faith stories?
I believe one of the biggest struggles at Davis Park is there's too large of a focus on image. And instead of being concerned about pleasing everyone, I think we should be concerned about feeding everyone. To reach out to the young that will ultimately come back and help Davis Park essentially thrive, you have to let go of the cookie cutter image and be real. Take the time to actually keep tabs on a teen. Image changes everything. All we want is something to relate to. So.
Thank you, Sam. All right, Daniel. How would you encourage Davis Park to empower your generation's faith stories?
I would say, I'll just say two things. First, I think that a lot, especially this year, I've seen a lot of people kind of get, I guess, offended or upset by very, in my opinion, very small, minor things. And so like this offended me, that offended me, whatever, that kind of thing. And I think that people are going to have to kind of build up a little bit of a tougher skin, because I mean I guess it's almost like, I guess, juvenile. I mean, I kind of think of like kids on the playground. One kid says to the other, "Your mom smells bad." When the kid knows that his mom doesn't smell, so she's a nice lady, so kind of get over it. I don't know. But with that being said, I know that sounds very harsh, but I think we also need to be aware that not everyone's going to be receptive to the things that we say as our friends or our family. So we need to be kind of sensitive to how other people are going to receive what we're going to say to them. And then after that, I think another thing that's very important for us to just kind of thrive or empower our generation is that you as adults need to honestly invest your time in teens. Because if you say you want to change their life or make an impact, you have to show that you take an interest in them. So that's getting them involved in stuff that's outside of the church walls. Because yeah, there's a lot of stuff that goes on in here that's great, that's awesome. But for me, and I think I speak for teens across the board, we want to be out there doing awesome things in the name of God, because that is how we create those bonds with the people in the church, is that we come together and we do some awesome stuff. So that's how I think we could definitely empower each other.
Daniel said something pretty significant, because in terms of sticky faith research, one of the most important things that helps faith stick and kids who've grown up in church and have gone off to college and transitioned to college is feeling sought out by adults, and then those adults helping them apply faith to daily life. Those are two of the biggest factors. So, and I heard that in your answer, so that's really good. So Bailey, how would you encourage Davis Park to empower your generation's stories?
I would say that together as a whole, you need to be together. And so if you're going to make an impact on somebody's life, you can't have somebody over here telling you one thing and someone over here telling you another thing. You need to be united. And it's like it says in the Bible that a divided house cannot stand. It says, united we stand, divided we fall. And so we need to take this thought that we all believe in the same thing. And so that's the main importance. That is just the number one thing. And we all believe that Jesus died on the cross for our sins. And so even if somebody else has a different opinion on something, I think you need to be able to let that go and just remember that they're not a bad person because they don't agree with you, but they are because they believe in the same thing that you believe that everyone needs to believe in, which is Jesus. And that's what it all comes down to.
All right. Thanks, Bailey. Scott said something that was really interesting, and when he said it last night as we were doing our practice run-through, I was like, hey, Scott, what you said just backed up my main point in my sermon, so you're awesome. Thanks for doing that. It was his thought that, we need to focus on things that lead to life change, not necessarily changing of opinion. I was wondering if you had if any of you had specific idea of what that might be in your mind, of how we need to what we need to focus on that leads to life change instead of changing of opinion.
To answer your question, a lot of times I found that when adults or really anyone shows interest in me, when they build that relationship and just show love to me and make me realize that, hey, this person's got my back. I can talk to them about things. They're supporting me and they love me just like my own parents do, or my brothers do, or my best friends do. That changed me a lot more than if they would just come up and try to change my outlook on a certain topic right off the bat. I think if you show them love and build that relationship, then you can get in more into changing specific things. But I think overall, just showing them love can do so much more than what you actually think.
Sam, did you want to say something on that?
I think as a teenager, when you go through hard times, you want to sit there and say, no, I got this. I don't need anybody. I've got this. But that's not true, especially when it's your church family. You want them to come up to you and, like you said, show you love and invest that time with you, and that is what will change your life, because it's those pivotal moments that mean the most to you. So, yeah.
Thanks, Sam. Danny, did you have something?
I think I have a little bit. To say. I mean, I always have something to say, right? I guess this would be in relation to the last answer that I had, but yeah, I think. Wait, so are we talking about changing people's lives outside of church or inside church, or just across the board? Okay, I just needed a little clarification. All right. I think for me, a lot of life-changing moments, and would be just stuff that we've done just outside of church. Like I said before, I mean, Op Camp, Opportunity Camp, an amazing, amazing program that has definitely just changed me as a person, just how I show love to others, and how much I understand that, like, there are people out there who aren't as fortunate as I am, who aren't as blessed as I am. And I think it's, again, that whole idea of, we need to find a cause, get together, and another thing is that young people love to feel empowered. They love to feel like they're in charge of something, even though they're really not. Okay, but that's what I think is very important, is that, like, there's stuff that goes on in Modesto a lot. Love Modesto, the gospel mission, all these amazing things that we can get involved in, and you just say, hey kids, let's go do this. You guys take care of it, and we'll just follow along. But you guys are behind the scenes, kind of pulling the strings or whatever, and then everyone's just doing awesome stuff, awesome stuff. So we just need to find causes that we can get involved in, and that could change the lives of the youth inside the church, the people inside the church, and people outside of the church walls too.
Thank you, Danny. What do you think, Bailey?
I have a specific example. Would you like a specific example?
Give me something specific, sure.
Okay. Well, for a few months over the past year, I didn't exactly know where I was going to go to college. I had this fear of where I was going or whatever, so I decided that I was going to stay and go to MJC for a while. And then just one day, I happened to go to lunch with my mom and Barb Beard, and we were just talking, and I didn't expect anything to happen. I didn't, but all of a sudden, we start talking about, well, why aren't you going? Or what is this, or what is that? And it was just the fact that somebody else talked to me about it and made it seem that possible that I could go somewhere else and still be who I am, just kind of cemented it for me. And so I really have Barb Beard to thank for me going to LSDU, as does my brother. So really, I just, it's just the certain relationships that you invest in, and then even in a moment that you don't think anything's going to come of it. Like, I didn't want to go out to lunch that day. I was having my wisdom teeth out the next day. I wasn't really in the mood. And so, but it's just, if I hadn't have gone, I probably wouldn't be going somewhere this August. And I'm just so excited for what's to come. And I'm so thankful for that day that seemed like nothing important was going to happen. And then all of a sudden, it did.
Awesome. Thanks for sharing that, guys. Give them a hand. Guys, thank you for your questions and answers. You guys can go back and sit down. All right, so I was driving home from the church building the other day, and something came across the radio, and the guy was saying that some new census data was coming out, and he said, do you know what the number one age that is represented in the United States of America today is? He gave the top 4. What do you think number 1 is? The number 1 age represented, the most number of people with this particular age, is 22. Number 2, second in line, 23. Third, 21. Number 4, 53. So you got a baby boomer in there. But in America today, the largest generation at this time are millennials. 18 to 34 years old. And what millennials remember most about is that we see in Sticky Faith research that we get from Fuller Youth Institute, the three top things that they remember of their time in youth group at church are, number one, the adults involved. Number two, the community formed. And number three, their friendships. Not necessarily arguments made and lessons taught, though that is important. But the adults involved, the community formed, and their friendships that they forged. Another thing is that what they mentioned several things that they want more of. And three of the top 5 things that they said they wanted more of are time for deep conversation, accountability, and number 3, time for one-on-one time with leaders. Time with leaders, deep conversation and accountability. What you get when you are in a relationship with adults that seek out to mentor and disciple these millennials and children. And again, the 2 biggest factors for faith sticking in somebody who's grown up in church, gone through a youth group, gone through student ministry, transitioned off to college, the 2 biggest factors are, again, adults who have sought them out, and they have felt that the adults have sought them out. And number 2, the feeling that they get, the feeling that those adults have helped them apply their faith to daily life. Didn't just teach them theology, taught how to apply what the Bible has to say to their daily life. They need adults who, like Paul, talk about the weather. They need adults who, like Paul, share their stories which are empowered by the salvation that we have in Jesus Christ, that include the good things, the bad things, and also the ugly things that we all have in our stories. So that the teens and these millennials and our children can see that the greatest stories and the greatest growth can come, yes, from even the bad and the ugly. That they can still have, like we talked about this morning, a big influence begins with a small step. God can still use you. In fact, He can use you even more. You can have a greater story because of the bad and ugly things that happen in your life for good. So what are 2 things that you guys can do this morning, 2 next step for these millennials about to transition off to college? Number 1, there's a clear plastic container out in the Connection Center that you can donate money to them, because every college freshman needs a little bit of extra money in their pockets. If you have some money to donate to them, put it in that box before you leave this morning, and we're going to divide it up and give it to them as part of their gifts that they're going to receive at the grad party this afternoon from 3 to 5. And if you want to come to that, because it's going to be pretty cool. It's a pretty great event that we're going to do from 3 to 5 today in the family room in the NPR for these seniors and their families. And number 2, another thing that you can do for these millennials and for the homelanders, that children were called born after 9/11, for our children here at Davis Park, the second thing you can do is volunteer for Orange. Volunteer for Orange and help empower this generation of young believers, empower their stories, seek after these children. Invest your life and speak into their lives so that they can, once they grow up and turn 18 and transition off to college, their faith will stick because of what you did for them while they were here. Volunteer for Orange. A person discipled by an adult. A person who has an adult speak into their life. A person who has an adult care and intentionally seek out them before they go off to college. They are 7.3 times more likely to do the very same thing for somebody else when they're an adult. So if we want to get better at doing the thing that God calls us to do, that we call the Great Commission, then we need to do that for our children. You have more power than you think you do to bring about changes in people's lives by the stories you tell than the arguments that you make. And again, our main point is this. A person who has a testimony, a person with a story, is never at the mercy of a person with an argument. Paul had a story to tell, and look what he did. And like Paul, we ourselves are caught up and have been able to be ushered in and become a part of that greater grand narrative and story that is creation and God and salvation in Jesus Christ. Let God use you to be the light to shine upon these children and these millennials and these homelanders when they are on their road to Damascus. Let God use you as adults right now, here now, for our children right here, right now, to be that light to shine upon them as they travel on their road to Damascus, as they travel on their road with the good and the bad and the ugly, as they are forming their stories. Help empower their stories. A person with a testimony, a person with a story is never at the mercy of a person with an argument. If you want to become a part of the story that is creation and salvation in Jesus Christ this morning, we welcome you to come up and we will pray for you or do whatever we can to help you out. If you need to, come forward. Ministers and elders will meet you at the front at this time as we stand and as we sing.